Communities United Against Police Brutality Reinvestigation presents Marcus Golden, Part 3. The reinvestigation found that the evidence in this case tells a different story than the narrative spread by the St. Paul Police Department, Washington County Attorney's Office, and mainstream media outlets. Here are the facts. A male called in a harassment complaint on Marcus on January 14, 2015, around 2:14 a.m. The caller was safely locked in the apartment building, was not in fear of his life, he just wanted Marcus off the property, and did not block Marcus on the texting app. The 911 caller and Marcus had known each other for a while because they were involved with the same woman. All three, Marcus, the 911 caller, and the woman, continued to engage in messaging each other. Based on that fact, it seems there was a lot more going on between them than the narrative the police presented. Two other squads were assigned by dispatch to the harassment complaint call. Dover Spike and Peck violated St. Paul Police Department policy by failing to notify dispatch they were going to the call, which is an officer safety issue. Arriving without activating the overhead squad lights, sirens, and in-car camera, another officer safety issue. Failing to speak first with the 911 caller and investigate whether a crime had actually been committed. The officers never confirmed that, quote, threatening text messages, unquote, were ever sent by Marcus, and St. Paul Police Department has failed to produce them to this day. This photograph taken by the St. Paul Police Department shows Marcus's point of view. Without the overhead red and blue lights, Marcus may not have known it was a police squad car. He would have been blinded by the spotlight. Remember, this was a snowy, early January morning. The parking lot was dark. The police narrative claims that Marcus accelerated and drove directly at the officers. However, the officers had differing accounts of what happened after they had arrived. Why do none of the statements of the officers who witnessed the event match up? Officer Peck claims that Marcus drove straight at his partner. Peck, in his interview, says, quote, "And I see Jeremy kind of sidestep to his right, like getting out of the way of the vehicle," end quote. The investigators later asked Peck, quote, "So you're giving a bunch of commands, he's, Marcus, not complying, he decides he's going to take off? He drives straight at your partner?" End quote. Peck responds, quote, "Yep," end quote. Peck said, "We're spotlighting him and I'm standing pretty much at the front of our vehicle, kind of offset from the front right corner. And I'm standing there and I start walking towards him. I remember Jeremy was on the driver's side of the vehicle, of our squad I should say. And he was going right towards Jeremy. And at that point I thought, okay, I'm gonna run back to the squad because we're gonna chase this guy. And I see Jeremy at the last second when I got basically to my door. I see Jeremy with his gun out, pointing, and he's right in front of the vehicle. At this moment, Officer Peck has zero fear for his life or the life of Officer Doverspike, because Peck's thought is not of the safety of his partner, but of chasing the suspect. According to Officer Peck's statement, he ran back to the squad. In those seconds, Officer Peck did not witness what Officer Doverspike was doing. He said, "I was on the passenger side still, and I kind of backed up even further to see where Jeremy was and where this vehicle was." Next, Officer Peck saw the vehicle hit something, causing it to redirect almost, and where Jeremy was standing, it would have clipped him and sucked him underneath the car. Then, I see the glass break in front of Jeremy of the suspect's vehicle. And next, I see the window break and I hear a pop. Now, I'm a pretty avid shooter. I know a gunshot when I hear it. Then, Peck states, I had my gun out and I just fired rounds, several rounds, right at the driver's window. This picture shows where the 5 casings were found from Officer Peck and where the broken glass was after Doverspike shot. If Officer Peck saw Marcus drive straight at his partner, then why did he turn and run to the car to get in the passenger side and chase Marcus? Why did Peck not use deadly force in that immediate moment if he was afraid for his partner's life? The fact is, Marcus was not a threat at that moment. The officers had no proof that a crime had been committed. They didn't speak with the 911 caller, and they did not see any alleged threatening text messages. The casing's evidence shows the truth of where the officers were when they fired rounds. Marcus was shot in the head, so he must have been alive when he corrected the car to avoid hitting the building. We believe Marcus was killed when he drove through the red square on the photo to the right. The tire track treads go from dark to light, meaning Marcus was no longer pressing on the accelerator. Officer Doverspike presents a different narrative. He says, "I step out from behind my car to air the license plate. When I get done airing the plate, where we are and that we're on scene, all of a sudden I see the driver drop his right hand. All of a sudden he reaches his right hand up and puts the car in drive, I'm assuming, because I can hear it. See him get the steering or the center or the drive shaft or whatever in gear. He's looking right at me. So I raise my gun up from the low ready to pointing at him. At this point, he drops down to the side, covering the passenger seat. I can't see him. All of a sudden, he pops his head up just enough where he can see over the dashboard. I see him looking at me, and then he takes off." Then Doverspike states, "And all I can think of is, oh fuck. The next thing I know, his car hits my gun. I fire 2 rounds. I don't know if he slides or was just sliding on the snow or something, but I think it came close to the rear of his car, either hitting the fire hydrant or came really close to hitting it." According to Doverspike, the car hits his gun. He fires 2 shots and then Marcus hits the fire hydrant. Remember that Officer Peck stated he heard the car hit something first and then heard a gunshot. If Doverspike's recollection is correct, Doverspike would have fired at Marcus's car when the car was traveling between the parking spot and the fire hydrant, in the green shaded zone on the photo. It is not possible that Doverspike shot Marcus at this point in time if his shell casings are located nowhere near the shaded zones. The officers both stated they fired in the easterly direction. The green shaded zone is to the west of the lot. The first responding officer statements, Cars Adam and Sandell. Officer Scott Sandell was a field training officer operating Squad 211T with his trainee officer, Tyrone Cars Adams. They arrived, pulled into the front lot, and heard Squad 215, Doverspike and Peck, radio they were in the back with the suspect. As they made the corner into the parking lot, Officer Sandell immediately observed Squad 215 in the far back west end of the lot. Officer Sandell observed both officers Doverspike and Peck standing outside the squad. One officer, Doverspike, was standing near the driver's side rear wheel well. Peck was standing back behind the squad on the passenger side. He then observed a green SUV come around the front of the squad eastbound towards them. He could not tell if the SUV was going forward or reverse. It was going really fast for a parking lot. Officer Sandell next observed the suspect vehicle come around the squad car and observed one of the officers moving back to avoid being hit by the vehicle. The following statement from Officer Sandell contradicts the earlier statements provided by Officer Doverspike and Peck. He states, "As this was happening, Officer Sandell heard 6 to 10 shots and actually observed the muzzle flashes. The suspect vehicle then struck the fire hydrant." This does not align with Officer Peck's earlier statements that Marcus's car hit the fire hydrant and then he began shooting. It also doesn't align with the location of Officer Peck's casings. Officer Tyrone Cars Adams was on FTO and was driving the squad car 211T. As Cars Adams was driving towards Doverspike, Peck, and Marcus, he observed a car pass in front of the officer, then heard several shots. Cars Adams stopped and placed his car in park. He said he observed the vehicle that drove towards the officers almost come to a stop. Officers Sandell, Peck, and Doverspike do not mention the car coming to a stop or slowing. This picture gives us a clear indication of where the squad car was, where our officers were, where the fire hydrant was, where Dover Spike fell, where Dover Spike's casings were found, where Peck's casings were found, and where the broken glass after Dover Spike's shot was found. See Part 4 for more.